They shaped our world in ways you never imagined, from inventing democracy to saving millions with ancient medicine. But history tried to erase them. Who were the first people, and how do their forgotten secrets still shape our lives today? This is the lost legacy of Native Americans, and it's time to remember. Long before skyscrapers and highways, before the first European ships touched American shores, there were civilizations, ancient, powerful, and deeply connected to the land. But where did they come from? How did they live? And what can we learn from their incredible legacy? This is the true story of the first Americans. It all started over 15,000 years ago, or maybe even earlier. Scientists believe the first Native Americans arrived from Asia, crossing the frozen Bering Land Bridge, a massive stretch of land that once connected Siberia and Alaska. These early explorers followed herds of mammoths, unknowingly stepping into a vast new world. Alternative theory. But wait, could there be another explanation? Some experts believe ancient seafarers traveled along the Pacific coast in boats settling far earlier than we once thought. Show a side-by-side of both theories, engaging the audience. What do you think, land or sea? Fast forward thousands of years, and great civilizations rose across North America. Let's start with the ancestral Pueblons, the famous cliff dwellers of the Southwest. The ancestral Pueblons built multi-story homes inside cliff for protection, create intricate road systems and advanced farming techniques, mysteriously vanished, leaving behind stunning ruins like Mesa Verde, transitioned to the Midwest, Cahokia, the Mississippian culture, and Cahokia. Meanwhile, in the heart of North America, the Mississippians built something extraordinary. Cahokia, the largest pre-Columbian city in the US. It had massive earthen pyramids, grand plazas, and a population rivaling London at the time. Fun fact, Cahokia even had a Woodhenge, a giant solar calendar similar to Stonehenge in England. Cut to the northeast, the Iroquois Confederacy. The Iroquois Confederacy, the first democracy, while many kingdoms ruled by warriors, the Iroquois built something revolutionary, a democracy, their great law of peace. Influenced the US Constitution, proving that Native Americans weren't just warriors, they were brilliant lawmakers. Show Native Americans hunting with bows, growing crops, and telling stories by the fire. Hunting, farming, and survival. Life wasn't easy. Native tribes were expert hunters, tracking buffalo across the plains, fishing in rivers, and using every part of an animal. Waste was unheard of. Farming. Did you know Native Americans domesticated corn, beans, and squash, known as the Three Sisters? This technique fed entire nations. Spirituality and connection to nature. For Native Americans, the earth wasn't just land. It was a living, breathing spirit. Every river, mountain, and tree had meaning. Their ceremonies honored the natural world, and their traditions were passed down through generations. Storytelling and language. Imagine a world with no books, no internet, only stories. Native American cultures preserve their history through oral traditions, passing knowledge from elders to children. And with over 300 languages, each tribe had a unique way of seeing the world. From mighty civilizations to rich traditions that still thrive today, the legacy of Native Americans is one of strength, wisdom, and survival. Their history isn't just the past, it's a living story, still being written. They were warriors, leaders, and visionaries. They defied empires, guided history, and fought for the survival of their people. But their story is one of both triumph and tragedy. This is the untold story of legendary Native American figures, the arrival of Europeans, and the battle for freedom. Sitting Bull, the warrior and leader. A fearless warrior and a spiritual leader, Sitting Bull of the Lakota Sioux became a symbol of resistance against the US government. He united the Plains tribes and led them to their greatest victory, the Battle of Little Bighorn. But his defiance made him a target, and his fate would be sealed in a tragic betrayal. Sacagawea, the guide who changed history. At just 16 years old, Sacagawea, a Shoshone woman, guided Lewis and Clark across uncharted territory. With her newborn baby on her back, she helped the explorers navigate mountains, negotiate with tribes, and survive the unknown. Without her, would America's westward expansion have even been possible? Crazy Horse, the man who defied an empire. He never signed a treaty, he never surrendered. Crazy Horse, the legendary Oglala Lakota warrior, led his people in one of the greatest native victories, the Battle of Little Bighorn. His skill on the battlefield made him a nightmare for the US Army, but like Sitting Bull, he was betrayed, and his death remains shrouded in mystery. First contact and early trade. At first, the meeting between Native Americans and Europeans was peaceful. They traded furs, knowledge and food, but soon greed and hunger for land changed everything. The impact of disease and colonization, smallpox, measles and influenza, invisible enemies that Native Americans had never encountered. Within a century of European arrival, 90% of some native populations were wiped out. The land was taken and the balance was shattered. Forced removals and the Trail of Tears. In the 1830s, the US government forced tens of thousands of Native Americans off their land. The Cherokee, Seminole, Creek and others were marched over 1,200 miles in brutal conditions. Thousands died along the way, and history would call it the Trail of Tears. The Battle of Little Big Horn, June 25, 1876. A force of 600 US soldiers, led by General Custer, charged into Lakota and Cheyenne territory, believing they could easily crush them. But they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and completely annihilated. Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse had won, but the war wasn't over. The Ghost Dance movement. In desperation, Native Americans turned to a new spiritual movement, the Ghost Dance. It was said to bring back lost ancestors, restore the land, and make warriors invincible. But the US saw it as a threat, and in 1890, at Wounded Knee, they massacred over 250 Lakota men, women, and children. The fight to preserve land and culture. But Native American history didn't end there. From the occupation of Alcatraz to the Standing Rock protests, indigenous people are still fighting for their land, their rights, and their heritage. Their lands were taken, their people nearly destroyed, but their spirit unbreakable. Native American history isn't just the past, it's still being written today. Want to hear more lost history? Like, subscribe and hit that bell. Join us on the next journey. Long before the great cities of the modern world, before the steel towers and endless roads, the land was alive. It spoke through the rivers, the trees, and the voices of the first people. They walked in harmony with the earth, and their wisdom shaped the world you know today. But most have forgotten. Tonight I will tell you a story of how Native Americans changed history forever. The people of these lands knew how to listen to nature. They cultivated crops that would one day feed the entire world, corn that grew tall like warriors, potatoes hidden in the soil like buried treasure, and beans that climbed towards the sky. But they did not grow them alone. They followed the teachings of the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, plants that helped each other thrive. This knowledge, passed from generation to generation, would one day spread beyond their villages and feed billions. The settlers who arrived on these shores did not know how to survive in this strange land, but the native people taught them, showing them which plants could heal, which foods could sustain them, and how to live with the land, not against it. Yet, as the world changed, so did the balance of power, and the wisdom of the first people was cast aside not long before there were pharmacies, before there were doctors in white coats. The first people knew the secrets of the earth's medicine. They treated fevers with the bark of the willow, what the world would later call aspirin. They fought sickness with echinacea, calmed pain with peppermint, and healed wounds with golden root. Their knowledge of plants would one day become the foundation of modern medicine. Yet few remember where it all began. The world had taken their knowledge, but forgotten their names, long before kings ruled with iron fists, before empires were built on conquest and greed. The Iroquois Confederacy had a different way. They believed in democracy. Their leaders were chosen not by force, but by wisdom. Women had a voice in choosing their chiefs. Laws were debated, not dictated. They lived by one rule: to think of the next 7 generations before making a decision that the world would claim democracy as its own. But the seeds had been planted long before the first American flag was ever raised. Time passed, and the world grew. But for Native Americans, growth did not mean prosperity. Their lands were taken, their voices silenced, their culture pushed into the shadows. Yet they refused to disappear. They still fight, they still resist, they still hold on to the traditions of their ancestors, keeping the stories alive so that the world does not forget. And today they are reclaiming what was lost. The story of the first people is not just history, it is alive. It lives in the foods we eat, the medicines we take, and the democracy we cherish. It lives in the land, in the rivers, in the beating of the drum. It lives in those who refuse to be forgotten. They called this land their home for thousands of years. They knew its rivers, its mountains, its spirits. But then everything changed. They were strong. They were free, until greed and steel came knocking at their door. They came with promises, but brought only chains. Lands stolen, rivers poisoned, sacred grounds turned to dust. But they did not go quietly. They fought. Oh, how they fought. From the Great Plains to the deep forests, warriors like Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull stood against an empire. Victory was brief, but loss lasted forever. They marched not toward freedom, but exile. Thousands perished, a people nearly erased. But they did not vanish. Their spirit lives on, in the stories, in the songs, in the heartbeat of their people. Because the people are never truly gone, as long as the story is still told. And now, my children, it is your turn to remember. The world has tried to erase our story, but as long as we speak it, it will never die. History is not just written in books. It is written in the land, in the people, in the voices that refuse to be silenced. If you want more stories that history forgot, subscribe and join us on this journey. The past is calling. Are you ready to listen?